One missile launched, radar locked it, defense fired, and then something happened in the sky above 7 million people. That every Pentagon general, every missile defense engineer, every billion-dollar system was never built to stop. What they saw next? It looked like the sky was falling apart, and the most expensive defense shield in human history had already lost. Welcome back to Currency Archives, the station that tells you what the news won't. Now, before we go any further, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, yet think of it this way, my friend. You wouldn't leave the house in the morning without your morning chai, would you? Don't leave this channel until you've clicked the subscribe button. It takes 1 second, just like that rocket did before everything changed. And hey, we're a family here from all parts of this world. Drop in the comments below, where in the world are you watching us from today? Because what's coming next in this video touches every single one of you, no matter where you are. Let's get into it. On the night of March 6th, 2026, 7 million people in Israel looked up. What they saw in the sky above them was not what any general had prepared for. It was not what any defense engineer had planned against, and it was certainly not what the billions of dollars spent on missile defense systems were ever meant to face. They saw one rocket become hundreds. For decades, the world's most powerful militaries worked on a simple assumption. A missile is fired, radar detects it, a tracking system locks onto it, and defender fires. One threat, one response. Clean, planned, controlled. This was the foundation, the complete logic that modern missile defense was built upon. Governments spent hundreds of billions of dollars perfecting this equation, testing it, refining it, selling it to their people as a shield, a promise of protection that money could buy and technology could ensure. America built the Patriot system on this reasoning. Israel built the Iron Dome on it. The Pentagon spent decades engineering layers of defense, each one built around the same core assumption that a missile is a single item moving in a single direction toward a single point. That belief died on March 6th. Here is what actually happened. Told not with panic, but with precision, Iran launched what looked to be a single missile. Radar systems detected it immediately. The tracking software locked on. The trajectory was determined within seconds. A defender was fired. The system worked exactly as designed. And then, at a precise altitude, chosen intentionally, the missile opened. From that single case, hundreds of individual warheads fired simultaneously. They spread outward across a wide area like an umbrella, opening midair, and kept falling toward the ground below. By the time the defense system understood what had just happened, the intercept window was already gone. The interceptor that had been fired hit the empty case. A shell, a fake, a ghost. The hundreds of submunitions were already falling, already spreading, already beyond the reach of any single response defense architecture ever made. To stop them at 02.2856, that point would have needed hundreds of interceptors launched in the same second. Not sequentially, not in waves, simultaneously, in 1 second. No system on Earth is built to do that. The films that spread across the internet that night did not look like war footage. They looked like fireworks, bright lines spreading outward across the Israeli sky. A strange, almost beautiful pattern that millions of people watched without fully understanding what they were seeing. They were not watching a missile being stopped. They were watching the moment one missile became hundreds. They were watching the moment a defense system funded by generations of taxpayers engineered by the best military minds in the world realized it had already lost. Now, here is where the story stops being about weapons and starts being about something every serious businessman and creator must understand. What Iran did that night was not simply a military development, it was an economic disruption event. Consider the numbers with clear eyes. America's most advanced interceptor weapons cost between $3 million and $9 million each one to try to neutralize a single cluster missile launch. Trying to stop the submunitions individually after separation would require dozens of interceptors fired in the same moment. That amounts to somewhere between $100 million and $300 million in defense spending to stop a single incoming strike. Iran's cluster rocket costs a fraction of that. One side is spending millions to fight. The other side must spend hundreds of millions to protect. And Iran can fire dozens of these in a single night. This is not a military mismatch. This is an economic imbalance. And economic asymmetries of this scale do not stay contained to the fight. The equation that modern missile defense was built on one threat, one reaction, has been broken. What replaces it, and what that replacement costs the global economy, is what no financial story is currently telling the business community. There's a business principle that every entrepreneur finally learns, usually the hard way. It is not the strongest competitor that destroys a business. It is the cheapest one who makes the expensive one unimportant. Blockbuster did not lose to a better video store. It lost to a business that made video stores unnecessary. Kodak did not lose to a better camera. It lost to a gadget that made film rolls useless. Nokia did not lose to a better phone. It lost to a platform that made button keyboards useless. In every case, the disruption followed the same trend. One side kept spending in perfecting an expensive system. The other side made a cheaper way to make that expensive system useless. What Iran just deployed over Israeli skies on March 6, 2026, is the military version of that exact concept. And the business world is not paying attention because they are still watching it as a war story. It is not a war story, it is a disruptive story. To understand what Iran actually built, one must think less like a soldier and more like a businessman. For decades, Western defense contractors worked inside a comfortable business model. Governments needed safety. Contractors built expensive methods to provide it. The more sophisticated the threat, the more sophisticated and expensive the answer. Rathon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing. These companies grew inside a system where complexity meant profit, and every new threat justified a new multi-billion-dollar deal. The underlying assumption of this entire business was simple. The attacker and the defender would always be fighting on the same technological plane. If Iran built a faster rocket, America would build a faster chaser. If Iran built a more maneuverable warhead, America would build a smarter tracking device. It was an arms race. Expensive on both sides, but doable, because both sides were playing the same game. Iran just changed the game completely. Here is the architecture of what they built, explained not in military language, but in the language of competitive strategy. A cluster rocket does not try to beat the interceptor. It does not try to fly faster or maneuver more fiercely. It does not compete with the defense system on the military system's terms. Instead, it waits. It starts as a single object. It helps the radar to detect it. It helps the tracking system to lock on. It lets the interceptor to fire. It cooperates with every stage of the protection process, right up until the precise moment the defense system is fully engaged. And then it transforms at a calculated altitude chosen especially to fall inside the gap between detection and interception. The missile opens. Hundreds of individual warheads launch simultaneously. The defense systems committed interceptor hits an empty shell. And the warheads, now too numerous, too spread, and too low for any sequential reaction, continue to their targets. The cluster missile did not beat the defense system by being better. It defeated it by making the defense system's entire investment useless at the moment of truth. This is not military creation. This is economic disruption applied to fighting. Now consider what this means for the balance sheets of countries. America currently keeps defense. Contracts worth hundreds of billions of dollars built around interception technology, the Patriot Advanced Capability System, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense known as THAAD, the Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense System, each one made with extraordinary precision, each one priced properly. A single THAAD interceptor costs nearly $10 million. A Patriot Pass-3 jammer costs around $4 million. These are not tools of aggression. They are tools of response. Their entire value statement rests on one assumption that they can consistently neutralize an incoming threat. Against a cluster rocket launch, that assumption collapses. To try interception of submunitions after separation, a defender would need to fire dozens of interceptors in a single second. That is not a tactical problem. That is a procurement problem, a budget problem, an economic problem that no current defense spending model was meant to solve. Iran spent approximately $1 million per missile to make a $10 million defense fire at an empty shell. That is not a military win. That is a margin play. And in the world of business, the side with the better edge always wins the longer war. There's a moment in every big economic shift that most people miss completely, not because they are not watching, but because they are watching the wrong thing. In 2008, most buyers watched the housing market. They should have been watching the products sitting underneath it. In 2020, most businesses watched the virus. They should have been watching the stock, chains slowly fracturing behind it. In 2022, most analysts watched the Ukraine war. They should have been watching the European energy grid being repriced in real time beneath it. History does not announce its turning points loudly. It whispers them through second-order effects that only the most disciplined observers ever catch in time. Right now, the world is watching Iran's cluster rocket as a military story. The stopping point is not the missile. It is everything the rocket just set into motion. Begin with the most obvious pressure point, one that every businessman, every entrepreneur, and every serious investor must understand before anything else: the Strait of Hormuz. This tight stretch of water, just 21 miles wide at its most constrained point, is the single most economically important choke point on the planet. Approximately 20% of the world's entire oil supply goes through it every single day. That includes the majority of crude supplies from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran itself. For decades, the West's skill to keep that strait open based on one foundational guarantee that American naval power in the region was overwhelming, credible, and successfully unchallenged. The guarantee just became significantly more complicated when Iran showed on March 6th that a single cluster missile launch can overwhelm the most powerful point defense systems in the world. Every naval vessel actually operating in or near the Persian Gulf entered a different risk calculation, not a hypothetical risk. A documented, proven, mathematically quantified risk. Insurance adjusters noticed within hours. Shipping officials noticed within hours. Energy dealers noticed within hours. The business world is still watching the missile footage. Here's what is actually moving beneath the surface, told with accuracy that serious decision makers require. Global shipping insurance rates for vessels transiting the Persian Gulf corridor began repricing immediately following the March 6th protest. This is not guesswork. This is normal actuarial response to a documented threat improvement. When the risk profile of a transit route changes, the cost of insuring goods through that route changes with it. Higher insurance costs mean higher shipping costs. Higher shipping costs mean higher delivered costs for every object that moves through or depends on Gulf energy supply lines. And in a globally integrated economy, that category of product covers nearly everything. Maersk, one of the world's largest shipping operators, had already suspended multiple routes, blaming extreme military risk in the region. That suspension was not a protection, it was a price signal. When the world's largest shipping companies begin rerouting away from a corridor, the cost of moving goods through that corridor does not gradually grow. It reprices overnight. Now, follow the energy thread because this is where the business effects become impossible to ignore. Brent oil was already trading above $86 per barrel and accelerating at the time of writing. Qatar, one of the world's most important liquefied natural gas exporters, had halted crude loading operations totally. 20% of global oil supply was effectively trapped behind a choke point that American naval power could no longer ensure with the same credibility it held 72 hours earlier. For innovators and business owners, this is not an abstract geopolitical event. This is an energy cost event. And energy cost events do not stay limited to fuel prices. They move through every layer of a modern economy with quiet, systematic accuracy. Manufacturing costs rise, transport costs rise, agricultural costs rise because modern farming runs on diesel and fertilizer, both petroleum derivatives. Consumer prices rise, and central banks, already managing a fragile inflation environment, face a policy contradiction they have no clean answer for, raise rates to fight inflation, and risk cracking an already stressed credit market, hold rates, and watch purchasing power erode further across every major country. There's no comfortable exit from that situation. But here's the news that the financial press has almost entirely failed to cover, and it is probably the most consequential of all. China's two biggest state energy companies, CIPC and Petrochina, had quietly issued an emergency internal directive in the days preceding the March 6th missile demonstration. Video of a missile becoming hundreds in a sky above 7 million people who never saw it coming. The equation broke on March 6, 2026. The only question that remains for every business, investor, and serious decision maker watching this is whether they will act on what that broken equation actually means before the window closes. This has been Currency Archives, the program that tells you what the news will